Russia versus America in the Ukraine. A nuclear war between America and Russia is closer than ever. The escalating tensions in East Europe due to Russia and America's stubbornness and refusal to compromise on the issues of security and NATO presence in the Black Sea, and 4 former Soviet states, such as the Ukraine, are getting out of control. Both sides continue to mass their forces. Meanwhile, talks and negotiations seem to be slow, unproductive, and rather vague. Many people around the world are wondering what will happen if a war between NATO and Russia broke out, and can it escalate into a nuclear war? Can there be winners and losers in such a war? Welcome to the World Econ News, your daily dose of economics and finance. If you're interested in topics influencing the world's economies and global financial flows, this is the place for you. Watch till the end if you want to get the latest on everything. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification button to get the latest updates. Let's go. World Wars I and II both started in Europe. Most of the deaths in both wars were Europeans, including Russians. Most of the destruction was also focused within the boundaries of the European continent. The First World War ignited a process in which Europe and North America began to realize that colonialism is unsustainable, inhumane, and fascist, and slavery is evil. The Second World War forced all the major global imperial and colonial forces in Europe, in addition to America, Japan, and Russia, to enter a state of gradual withdrawal from what they considered colonies, free source of natural resources and geopolitical assets, and began ending the exploitation of these nations' resources and the enslavement of their populations. Russia was the last imperial force to let go of occupied nations in its Soviet empire. Since then, the world became a better place and more free, safe, and democratic than ever. However, the old feuds between the old colonial powers never ceased to exist. The Great Wars were followed by the Cold War, which resulted in more than 50 million deaths outside Europe, America, and Russia, in third world countries where the colonial forces fought proxy wars. The Cold War ended in 1991. However, the feuds, hate, and old colonial mentality did not end. One of the present most negative remnants from the recent dark old past is NATO, not because it's dedicated to protecting Western European nations, the USA, Canada, and a few other countries, but because its doctrine is anti-Russian and anti-Chinese. Little to no effort has been invested by NATO to ease the tensions between West Europe and Russia, and the West and China. NATO presents itself as the de facto protector of democracy and freedom, yet its actions in provoking Russia and China are by all means destructive and counterproductive. Historically speaking, NATO never stopped any atrocities and genocides from taking place. In fact, its mandate is designed to prevent it from getting involved in any conflict outside the boundaries of its 30 member states. It did, however, contribute militarily to most of America's wars against numerous nations over the past 70 years. Now Europe is faced with a dilemma. It either pleases the United States, Britain, and Canada by allowing NATO to expand closer to Russia and thus risk becoming a center of another world war, or not pleasing them by openly opposing the expansion of NATO in merely 4 out of 44 European countries. Russia is not asking for much, nor does it want to occupy Eastern European countries adjacent to its borders. It only wants guarantees that NATO will not admit these nations and will not have military bases and operations within a particular distance from its borders. I'm not defending Russia. We all know that Russia is not a saint. According to global security experts, Russia has been responding accordingly to NATO's eastwards expansion plans. It's also important to point here that NATO's agenda in East Europe is driven 100% by America's global agenda, not by the European Union states, which prefer a quiet Eastern Front and increased trade with Russia. The United States has already begun gathering forces to find alternatives for Russia's gas and oil, which Europe heavily relies on. Such mobilization means that America and its multinational firms are planning to profit from Europe's annual spending of nearly $1 trillion on natural gas and oil. The current crisis is also bound to double the European states' demand for American weapons. So I'll answer the first question. What will happen if a war between NATO and Russia broke out and it escalated into nuclear war? The answer is obvious. As long as NATO is expanding closer and closer to Russia and its doctrine is anti-Russian, there will always be a high probability of war breaking out in the whole of Europe. Any assumptions that such a war would be between West Europe and Russia are wrong, due to the fact that most European countries, in spite of the current wordy rhetoric, are not even remotely interested in going to war with Russia. Thus, many European nations will abstain from joining the war. The war will be between Russia and America. Only the United Kingdom, Canada, and possibly Australia will dedicate their entire armed forces and resources to aiding America during the battle via the proxy, NATO. Iran, China, North Korea, and many other nations that have beef with America and the UK will secretly drown Russia with covert support and war supplies. China will seize the opportunity and annex Taiwan and enforce its naval boundaries in the South China Sea and beyond. North Korea might also seize the opportunity and invade South Korea. Russia will also establish military bases in some South American states, such as Venezuela, and it might even lose its head and establish bases in Cuba. EU states would face a huge dilemma and are likely to create a defense wall around the EU's 27 member states, along with Sweden, Finland, Switzerland, and a few other non-member states. These non-member states will be forced to concede and join the Union in order to establish a stronger bloc. Turkey would prefer to join the new EU bloc, while either exiting NATO altogether or contributing in a minimum manner, while playing the mediator role. Turkey also holds the keys to the Black Sea. It can prevent all ships from entering and exiting the Black Sea, hence minimizing naval confrontations between the US and Russia in the Mediterranean Sea. The new enlarged EU bloc and Turkey will likely broker lucrative behind-the-doors deals with Russia on the condition that they remain not involved in the war, at least not in a direct manner. Because if they did get involved directly, their major cities will become war zones, constantly showered with Russian missiles and airstrikes. Many major European cities are already within Russia's long-range artillery fire. Most of the heavy fighting, if not entirely, would be concentrated in the Ukraine, the Baltic Sea, and possibly the Black Sea, and countries such as Belarus, Moldova, Estonia, Latvia, eastern Romania, and eastern Hungary. Eventually, Russia will pull back to what it considers a final and acceptable red line within the Ukraine, and possibly other states it shares borders with, such as Estonia and Latvia. NATO members, Latvia and Estonia, might experience minor land losses along the border with Russia. That will heavily depend on their role during any possible war. Russia might also annex the coastal shores of Ukraine, extending from Crimea to Moldova for the purpose of increasing its dominance in the Black Sea. Moldova is almost guaranteed to become part of the new Russia. The European Union will not be able to exert economic pressure on Russia because European investors from EU states have more than $1 trillion invested in Russia, Kazakhstan, and other Central Asian states that are literally in Russia's left pocket. This leads to an important question. Can this war turn into a nuclear war? The answer is an absolute yes. There is a reason America and Russia have been avoiding direct conflict since the end of World War II. The Cold War was not a mere accident. It was the war of choice between the two countries. Why? Because both sides knew that their military and nuclear capabilities, if fully released, can almost certainly mean the annihilation of their countries and a global nuclear fallout that could end life on planet Earth permanently. People underestimate the destructiveness of nuclear weapons. The United States and Russia have enough nuclear weapons to wipe out life from the face of the Earth twice. Every single scenario for nuclear war between Russia and the USA ends with the end of life on the planet. There is no such thing as a limited nuclear war. Neither side would accept losing the war, nor would hesitate to fire their entire nuclear arsenal in response to one nuclear explosion on their soil. This means the answer to the last question, can there be winners and losers in such a war? The answer is no. Einstein once said, I know not with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. Russia did not initiate the new crisis in East Europe. NATO did. The EU prefers a quiet Europe and good relations with Russia over expanding NATO to appease the American geopolitical and global hegemony agendas. Europe is between a rock and a hard place and must undertake serious steps to prevent becoming a World War III battleground. Would you like to learn more about what influences the world's economies and global financial flows? Click on one of the videos that shows up on the left or go to our channel to find other interesting topics, and I'll see you next time.